Hello and welcome back to the Hands on IT podcast. As always, I'm your host, Landon Miles. This podcast is a part of the Automox Autonomous IT podcast network, and you can look for new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. So, from the latest in vulnerabilities, cybersecurity to everything IT, the Autonomous IT podcast network has something for you. So, today we have a neat episode lined up for you. We'll be exploring a critical aspect of IT that often goes unnoticed, but is essential to the innovation and problem solving aspects of our field: creativity. So many people think of IT as a rigid technical domain, but in reality, it thrives on creative solutions and innovative thinking. Whether it's developing new software, designing user friendly interfaces, or solving complex problems, creativity plays an important role in making IT not just functional, but also engaging and effective. When it comes to complex topics like this, I always like to look and find people that do a really good job at it, whether they're inside or outside of the IT industry, and then talk to them and try to learn from their experience and expertise, then apply it to my life, to me. So this week, our guest is Jon Levenson, and he is one of the most skilled people I've ever worked with at fostering creativity. He has a unique perspective on this and blends his background in the arts with the career in technology. So let's go chat with Jon. All right. Hello, Jon, and welcome to the Hands on IT podcast.
Hey, Landon. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on. The best part about having a podcast is that I get to make all my favorite people be on it with me. But yeah, so can you start by sharing a bit about your background, your role at Automox, who you are?
Yeah. My name's Jon Levenson. I am the manager of content and community here at Automox. And I have a bit of an odd story, I think. I sort of fell into tech. I was a career actor for most of my life, which is where I fell in love with not just creative work, but healthy collaboration. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
And then about 12 years ago, my brother-in-law went overseas. He was in the Navy, and my sister had two little kids. And so I came home to help her out, which is when I stopped acting and I started to pour all of my creative energy into writing, which then turned into a career in copywriting and some script writing and some podcast writing for Spotify. And that's what eventually led me to Automox.
Very cool. I don't think I even knew that whole story. But yeah, well, so one of the reasons I asked you on the podcast, we've been in this podcast so far, we've been talking about kind of the importance of creativity in IT, and that IT is kind of an inherently creative endeavor. But a lot of times it's not seen as that. So you are one of the best people I've ever met at making an environment conducive to creativity. So, what are the key elements that you do to make an environment creative based on your experience? What makes the environment conducive to creativity?
Okay, first of all, thank you for saying that. That's so nice. Yeah, I would say there are a few different tenets that I try to cling to in terms of creating a safe space for creativity. The first is putting the work first.
Mhm.
As you can imagine, in the arts and anywhere in business, there can be a lot of ego. Um, and my favorite experiences were always when the designers and the cast and the crew on something were on board because they loved the play or the film or the project,
Yeah.
whatever the piece was that they were trying to communicate. So when everyone believes in the work and the importance of the work and you put that first, then competition between the collaborators kind of fades, ego fades, and it becomes this sort of all hands on deck energy. There's this sort of natural order that evolves in the chaos to create something new. And, people's fears or insecurities start to die down a little bit. It just evaporates. And I think putting the piece you're working on, whether that's, a podcast series or a blog or even, script for code, that is the cure all, I think, for creative and problem solving insecurity.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And one of the areas I see, especially in IT, is that when there's a big problem, people tend to, like you said, like the chaos ensues and people tend to kind of fall into line. And this is what we need to do. This is how we need to do it. And it works really well. But a lot of times with the smaller projects, there may be a time for like, hey, I need to give this person feedback, or this may not be working as well as we need it to. Um, so kind of I think that actors in the creative world and that has a really really neat way of offering feedback. So what are your techniques that you have found effective in offering feedback and kind of inspiring creativity instead of squashing creativity?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, hmm. So it's interesting, right? As a former actor, I love to be directed.
Yeah.
So I like it when people tell me, hey, this is how we can do something better. Why don't you try it? It's a suggestion,
Mhm.
right? It's not a demand. But one of the best processes I ever came across for creative or for critical feedback is called the Liz Lerman critical response structure. And
Okay.
I learned this working at a developmental play company, developmental theater in New York called New York Theater Workshop. And the core steps of that process are: one, statements of meaning; two, creator as questioner; three, neutral questions; and then four, opinion time. And so if you can stick to these four tenets, it allows you to start with statements of meaning. So first you say, okay, this is what strikes me as meaningful or interesting or helpful about your work. And you just end the statement there. And it's like a great way to open conversation. Again, remembering like the thing you're creating is what's, I don't want to say on trial, but
Yeah.
is what is being critically investigated.
Yeah.
And then you allow the creator, the person who wrote the content, the person who built the code, to ask you questions. If, I'll stick to story writing because that's kind of my wheelhouse, but like,
Mhm.
if I was writing something, I could ask you, if you were evaluating me, okay, where are the gaps in the story? Where do you think I'm missing something? Or, I'll ask you all the time as the
Yeah.
technical marketing manager here, like, okay, I tweaked this sentence. Does it still make sense technically? And that's a way for me to engage with you first, even if you're
Mhm.
critically reviewing my work. Then neutral questions allows you, the critiquer, to ask questions without attaching any opinion yet. So you
Yeah.
say something like, okay, why did you choose to use the word unite instead of say something like come together? You know,
Mhm.
or what was the tone you were trying to get at in this piece? And then I'm able to give you a little bit more about like where I was coming from and my thought process. And it's just a way to really engage a constructive conversation. And then finally, step four, opinion time, you can say, okay, I have an opinion about it. Do you want to hear it? And I can say yay or nay. Usually,
Yeah.
healthy collaborative environment, you'll say yay. And then you can say, okay, great. This word, it jumps out to me as, it like distracts me or
Mhm.
whatever. And that's how you can get some meaningful conversation going about bettering a
Yeah.
piece or a process or whatever.
Yeah, so it almost seems to me kind of like the way to get a creative environment going is to solicit feedback on your work first and being like, "Hey, like this person, can you or whoever it is, can you give me feedback on this?" And I've found that like if you ask for feedback first, they're a lot more and you can do that in a respectful way, there's a lot more opening spaces for them to ask for feedback from you. Um, so kind of, is that what you have seen too? And kind of what other tips do you have on fostering creativity and feedback loops within a team?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's great when you ask for feedback is that you're letting your collaborator know that you're interested in making the work better.
Yeah.
That you're not just phoning it in, that you care, and that you want to collaborate, right? It's like an invitation. And so for me, I think invitation is a really good word in
Mhm.
terms of fostering creativity within a team. Um, it's like you're a kid and your friends are having a party, and all you want to do as a kid is be invited to that
Yeah.
party. Creative work is really fun. And sometimes in the mundanity of administrative or technical work, some people are like secretly craving
Yeah.
to do something fun or creative in their workday.
Absolutely.
So I would say invite your coworkers to engage. They can say no if they really don't have the time or interest, but most people, I think, are jonesing to get a little play date in their workday.
Absolutely.
And
Okay.
so that's really what creative work is. It's not, not that it's not serious at times, but it is invention. It does like spark that thing in you that made you passionate about your career or your role at work in the first place. So I say put out the invite. And if I may, there's one more thing that I'm constantly trying to work on, like
Yeah.
actively work on,
Go for it.
which is listening.
Mhm.
Uh, I
It's a
mean, I'm
tough
always
one.
trying to improve, right?
Yeah.
My listening skills with my team, with you guys and with friends and my sister and my husband. And, I think the need to be heard or seen is pretty
Yeah.
primal. Like we all feel like we just want to belong somewhere. And so allowing that time and space for somebody to communicate what they're thinking or what they're feeling, it fosters a safe place to innovate and bring new ideas to the table. It's really hard to do, I think,
Yeah.
for a lot of people. We're trained
Yeah.
to be like dance monkey dance, and sometimes you can learn so much more by watching some other monkey dance. So
That is true.
let your monkeys dance. Let those monkeys
Let the monkeys dance. I love it. I
dance.
love it. So another thing I wanted to talk to you about is just kind of the process of collaborating. So a lot of times, especially early on in people's creative careers, it's a very vulnerable process to share your creative endeavors with someone else. Um, but I have found, and it took me a long time to realize this, but like a lot of times, the more people you let in, the better it gets. And instead of just trying to, hey, like I want to solve this by myself and get the credit, um, or create this by myself and not let other people in, uh, it's never as good of a product. So, can you kind of touch on um, kind of the steps of letting people in, of bringing people into a creative process?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. There are people who are insanely creative in the best ways that do things all by themselves.
Yeah,
That's not the kind of creative work I was drawn to or am drawn to.
it's not nearly as fun either.
It's not fun.
Yeah,
You don't learn as much, I don't
yeah,
think. Well, I don't want to slam individual
yeah,
creativity. So I don't want to yuck that yum for people who are like, I like to go into my own little world and make
for
something
sure.
great. But for me, it's more fun to let people in. In something like what we do every day,
Mhm.
we know our audience is IT practitioners, but there are all kinds of IT practitioners out there.
Yeah,
And so if we relied only on our thoughts and knowledge and opinions and gut instincts, we would be cutting out more than, we'd be cutting out like 90% of that audience. The more people, and I realize this isn't always possible to let like 50 people in on a
Yeah.
creative process. You have deadlines and you have, structural guardrails. But if you can get a trust a trusted team of 6 or 7 different brains
Hmm.
to review your work, to, have a conversation with you about their perspective, then you can infuse whatever you're trying to get out there with multiple ideas and multiple perspectives. And then it would appeal to a broader base, even
Yeah.
within a really specific audience. So I'm a huge fan of, you know, putting something out there and letting some of your trusted coworkers vote on it or say yay or
Yeah.
nay or offer their thoughts. And you don't have to take every thought, right? Sometimes if you're really deeply involved on a piece, you know it better than others may.
Hmm.
But they are going to read it and respond as your audience would. And so it's
Yeah.
valuable to listen to that feedback too.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things you said there was kind of building a trusted network of people that you can share things with, and it's not like you don't it's not something you can just put out to the world all the time. It was like, hey, I've built these relationships with other people. I trust this person. I know that they're going to give the feedback that I need. I really trust their opinion, and being able to build that trusted network is just so critical. I think in the world of creativity, of it's like, hey, I wonder what Jon thinks on this. I'm going to send it to him and get some feedback. Or, but I think that is, yeah, I think that's a very wise thing to say there too. So I like that point.
Thanks.
So then, how do you create an environment where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas without fear or judgment?
Yeah. That to me, I think goes back to listening, right?
Yeah.
If someone's sharing their idea and you cut them off because you think you have a better idea, which maybe you do, or likely it's just a different idea,
Hmm.
um, then they're going to start to feel like they can't express themselves and express their idea, which, I think of it as like building, you know,
Hmm.
ideas layer on top of each other and finally you end at a full structure. But you have to go through some really, for lack of better terminology, like some really silly or like
Yeah.
ideas to get to the gold, whatever that is for you, right? So I think listening and allowing conversation works best when it's stacked.
Hmm.
And I just think, you know, letting those ideas be fully expressed so that you could layer on top of them and it'll probably come to a focal point where you go, yeah, that's what we want to say, you
Yeah.
know?
And I always think there's can't say this for every single one, but I always think there's like a little nuggets of wisdom even in like the really dumb ideas. It's like, okay, that's a dumb idea. It's like, okay, I'm going to say this, but I know that it's not a good idea, but what if we did this part of this, and like kind of pulling like the little nuggets out of each of those ideas. And I just I yeah, I don't think, I mean, overall it may be not the best idea, but there's always kind of some little things that you can build off. So like I think that it's so important to feel that you can share that. It's like, hey, like this, we can't do this, but what if we did this? And like, and it's also just fun to share bad ideas sometimes too.
It is.
Yeah.
It's really fun. Bad ideas end
Yeah.
up on t-shirts all the time.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it's like what you said about mining. It's mining for gold, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, I had a thought and I lost it, but that's okay.
No problem. No problem. All right. Well, then I guess final question is, are there any podcasts, books, resources, or anything like that that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yeah. The first thing I'd really like to share is that Liz Lerman critical response process that I was speaking about
Yeah,
earlier. Maybe we can link the PDF to this podcast
we
somehow.
absolutely can. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. So
Yeah, so that would be awesome. And then, I listen to Glennon Doyle's We Can Do Hard Things a lot.
oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. It just lets as she discusses various hard things in people's
Yeah.
lives, and she brings on the most insightful and incredible guests. But it kind of is a reminder that we're all human and we are all doing hard things all the time, or are asked to do hard things. That's life. And
Hmm.
so it gives me a sense of community and hope.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, very cool. We'll throw that one in the show notes too, and I might have to listen to a few more of those also.
right
So,
on.
but yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, John, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Landon.
I thought John shared some great insights into how creating an environment conducive to creativity and collaboration can transform the IT landscape and the creative landscape of almost any job or industry. So, from putting the work first and minimizing ego to creating a space for feedback, John highlighted the importance of fostering an environment where creativity can flourish. His experiences from the arts and writing and acting provide a fresh perspective on how we can apply creative processes and feedback mechanisms in our daily work in IT. I really like talking to people that are experts in their field and or fields that do things really well. And I really don't think that there's any field that does creative feedback and creativity better than the arts. I mean, it's an inherently creative process. And I think that IT is also an inherently creative process and an inherently creative industry, and we need to embrace it more. So, creativity isn't only about big projects, it's about finding innovative solutions to everyday challenges. So, whether you're coding, designing, or managing a team, inviting others to collaborate and share their ideas can lead to a better outcome and a more enjoyable work experience. It's not always about having the best idea. It's about building on each other's contributions to reach a common goal. Now, if you want to give others feedback and foster creativity within your team, start with asking them for feedback on your projects. And at first, they might not be very good at it, but have some thick skin. It'll be okay. And it gets easier and more natural with time. Asking others for feedback will open the door to them asking you for feedback and foster creativity. If you're interested in diving deeper into the topics we discussed, be sure to check out the resources linked in the description that John recommended, including the Liz Lerman critical response process and the We Can Do Hard Things podcast by Glennon Doyle. Again, links to these resources will be available in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining us today on the Hands on IT podcast. And until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, embrace creativity, and maybe take the time to ask someone for someone else's feedback on a project you've been working on.